Thanks all for joining us again for this next episode of the Jerusalem Thesis, presented by my fantastic panel led by Odon Lafontaine. And today we're going to learn about a place that is magical and fantastical. It is green, it is lush, it is where prophets are born, it is where great things happen. The world's greatest city, the world's oldest city, the world's most renowned city that didn't appear on maps until the 9th century. And it had dates, it had plums, it had apples, oranges, it had camels, it was green, it had fishermen, and it's called Mecca, in case you know what this magical city is. And it rivals Narnia for beauty, for magic and mystery. At least, well, Odon, we're supposed to be serious. So thanks all for joining us. Mel, very welcome. Paul, very welcome. So Odon, please open up for us. Tell us what we're talking about today, and then everyone else can make a brief intro and we can begin. Because last week, you nailed it. Thank you.
Yeah, it's the third installment in our Jerusalem or Mecca series. In the previous episode, we saw that Mecca is an impossible location. There is no water. It's completely isolated. You cannot have a trading activity from there. Everything is wrong with Mecca. And now we will look at what the Quran says about the Meccans, and thereafter in the next episode, what it says also about Mecca. And we will see that it does not fit the location of Mecca. Meccans are described as farmers and also as fishermen, which cannot be in Mecca. Yeah. So there is something really, really, really wrong with the Meccan narrative within Islam.
I agree with you. I know that I've mentioned Al-Mahabisha and Yemen, although I do agree with you that most of the story is set in the Levant, northern Levant, Syria, Jerusalem, and so on in that region. Clearly, this is where it generally draws from. I think this, as I said, there's a minor overlap with Yemen, which also does fit because they had to transfer all of that south. But yes, definitely. I mean, everything you said last week would just hit home so hard.
It might be, but the thing is not to get influenced by the concept that has been developed by the Islamic narrative, and mainly the concept of a unique place of origins. This is if you look into it, it's there's nothing besides the Islamic narrative to grant or to argue for a unique place of origins for Islam.
You know, I did the show on Monday where I took the statistics that I had where you find that within the book of Paul, within Joshua, within Jeremiah, within a number of biblical books, we looked at the statistics. In all of the Bible books, roughly 30% of the books talks about pagans because they're addressing a pagan audience as well as an existing Christian/Jewish or pre-Jewish audience, right? So there's a clear ratio of addressing foreigners, naming them, naming towns, naming places, naming people, events, describing them very clearly, and then also talking to a local audience. The Quran is 96% talking strictly about biblical characters, names 8 characters, I think 7 of whom seem to be, or 6 of whom seem to be titles, not actual names. So it's all mythical, it's allegorical, it's none of it's specific, none of it's detailed, and it alludes to the Bible. So there's a statistical issue there as well.
Mm-hmm. Agree. Mm-hmm.
Usama. So shall we do a quick round of summaries? Like so maybe take a moment, just quick introduction, and what do you think of the evidence that has been presented so far? Maybe start with you, JC.
Well, hello all. Happy to be here. I'm really looking forward to seeing what Odon has got for us about the farmers and the fishermen of Mecca. I like to actually hear about mythical creatures, so this is going to be fascinating. But yeah, everything that we have seen before is quite clear. Mecca could not have been there as we have been told in the Standard Islamic Narrative. So looking forward to continuing this exploration.
Cool. Thanks, Mel.
Did you say me? Sorry.
Yep. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, the evidence is compelling. the hydrological focus last week was absolutely crystal clear. If you ignore the Standard Islamic Narrative, you'd have to conclude that wherever Islam began or wherever the Quran was written, it wasn't in the southern Hijaz. So I think this one is going to be a very good episode, and it will really reinforce everything that we've said last week.
Yeah. Awesome. Paul. You're muted, Paul. You're muted right now.
You have to
Hi.
unmute.
Yes, I second what's been said. I thought Odin's presentation of the case against Mecca so far has been masterful. There's it's methodical. It leaves no stone unturned. There is just no way that Mecca could have existed in the way that the tradition describes. And yeah, looking forward to getting on to the next chapter, the farmers and the fishers.
Yeah, the farmers and fishermen of Mecca. Usama, you're nodding your head. Say hello and your thoughts.
I concur about everything I've heard so far, and I just have a couple problems. The first problem is the characters which he picked up from the Bible. He never told us one story accurate. He changed the information about each and every one of these stories by taking so much out and by adding so much ridiculous information, which is the opposite of the conclusion of the book of Revelation, chapter 22, where no one can add or take away. That's one thing. The other thing is the creation of invented story without any detail, like the green prophet. Quran chapter 18, the green prophet. I mean, literally, if you look at so many stories Muhammad made up, or whoever wrote the Quran invented or made up, I can take it and go with it any field, to the right, to the left, to the north and south, east and west. I can make up anything out of it. That's why when you go to the scholars of Islam to read their interpretation to these new stories Muhammad invented the Quran, they disagree beyond measure about who is the character Muhammad is talking about. And that is another problematic story, problematic situation in the Quran, in Islam.
Right. Yeah, I think the green prophet is the prophet to the Irish. That was the Islamic prophet to the Irish. But...
I have a theory on that one, but I'll come back to it and say.
All right, yeah, we'll definitely come back to that. So, Odon, over to you.
Let's get back to my presentation. As I said, we are now focusing on the Quran. What does it say exactly? And hopefully, in this stream, we'll be able to go around those two topics: Meccans as farmers and fishermen. We have to give credits to our forefathers and our foremothers, especially Dr. Edouard Marie-Gallès and Dr. Patricia Krone, who both in 2005 published one his thesis, the other an article explaining that there are some strange verses in the Quran describing the Meccans as farmers and fishermen. I will go back to Patricia Krone's article, but because it is much more detailed than Edouard Marie-Gallès' study in his book, in his 2 volumes, Le Messie sans prophète. Patricia Krone's article is available online. It's very easy to find. It's named "How Did the Quranic Pagans Make a Living?" And she studied every verse of the Quran mentioning a farming or fishing activity. And there are many. It's very, very strange.
Odon, I'm just going to interrupt you for one moment, please, if you forgive me. I just want to show this on the stream. We discussed this last week. Everyone, if you check the Epstein files and you look up the word Kaaba, because someone talk about the Epstein files and Christians. Now we're not going to get too drawn off the path here with this, but I want to show you a picture taken from the Epstein files of Mr. Jeffrey Epstein and the Kiswa cloth from the Kaaba that was given to him. So people in Saudi Arabia and various Muslims were so kind as to give Mr. Epstein 3 pieces from inside and outside the Kaaba. There's numerous documents in the Epstein files. I've shown them several times on the channel, where the Muslims donate to Mr. Epstein 3 pieces of the Kaaba for Mr. Epstein's mosque. Okay, this is what is written in the files. These are what we're giving to Mr. Epstein for his mosque. All right, so you put the numbers together and you figure out what the maths adds up to. But here we have, this is from the Epstein files of Mr. Epstein apparently looking at his kiswa cloth, which is a piece of the cloth from the Kaaba given to him by Muslims. So let's talk about Muslims and the Epstein files. Let's talk about Mecca and the Epstein files. Let's talk about the Kaaba and the Epstein files. And let's talk about Mr. Epstein's mosque. Okay, maybe Muslims need to do a little bit of explaining. So I'll transfer back to you, Odon. I just wanted to, you see, wanted to talk about that.
Okay, so let's go back to the 7th century when there was no Kaaba, no Kiswa, and no Epstein yet.
Wait a minute. No. I apologize, brother. There was Epstein by the name of Muhammad. Okay? That's why that Muhammad was the original Epstein. I mean, it's not because they disagree about the age of the female between 9 or 14. They're the same. They follow the same code of conduct. I'm sorry. You cannot tell me Epstein was not there. He was there.
Sort of, but I would argue for an Epstein-like conduct to be much more close to the conduct of the caliphs themselves, much more than Muhammad, because Muhammad, as we know him through the Islamic narrative, it's a fictional character. I don't think he married a 6-year-old girl. I think it's all made up to fit the narrative. But it's a discussion for another session.
Yeah, sure. I just think,
yeah. Can I
let's talk about Quranic farmers and fishermen. This is great.
Let's go to the farmers. But yeah, when you look at the Quran, you have many verses that are supposed to be proclamation from Muhammad to the Meccans. And these verses describe a farming activity, such as this one in Surah 46, and assigned to them, for them being the people of Mecca, a people that is described, it is explained in a previous verse, whose forefathers were not warned. They did not receive an Arab prophet. So they are the Arabs, according to the Islamic narrative. And most probably the Meccans themselves, not most probably, but according to the narrative, the Meccan themselves. And the sign that was given to them is that God transformed a dead earth and brought it to life, brought forth from it grain, and from it they eat. And we placed therein gardens of palm tree, grapevine, goes to birth from, therefore, some springs. There are no springs in Mecca. There are only wells that they may eat of this fruit and so on. And so here we have the prototype of many other verses that are supposed to be proclamation to Meccans. And it describes a farming activity. So let's look at other verses, such as 63, 64 in Surah 56. Have you seen that seed which you sow? So it's a you here. The proclamation is addressed to a Meccan audience. Is it you, the Meccan audience, who makes it grow? Or are we, God, the grower? Then this other verse, verse
is there
34
evidence, any
18.
evidence of grain and grapevines ever grown in Mecca?
No, they never grew in Mecca. It's not possible for it to grow in Mecca without a huge irrigation system. That is not possible in Mecca in the 7th century. and still today it will be very difficult.
I'm
But,
trying to find from Al-Tabari, Al-Qurtubi, Al-Jalalain. I know he's talking to the polytheist. Obviously, he's talking to the polytheist of his days, but I'm trying to find the word Mecca in there to see that he's talking about this specific piece of land. I'm going to be the devil advocate here, and how we can know is that these verses, Quran chapter 36, verses 33, 35, 36, whatever, they are talking about Mecca.
of course, it's all fantasy. The Islamic narrative is fantasy. But when you look at the tafsirs, you see that there are supposed to be Meccan verses that were proclaimed in Mecca to Meccans. So either believers, mu'minun, or associationists, mushrikun, but they were Meccans. There's the thing, I've already done this presentation to a French audience, and so I had many reactions from Muslims who told me, but you don't get the point. It's a proclamation for the whole of humanity. So there is nothing to deduct from the fact that he speaks about farming to people in Mecca who didn't farm. And my answer is that it's completely crazy to think that a prophet or any preacher would come to a place and talk about things that the people, that his audience, could not relate to or could not understand. Just imagine a preacher going to the north of Canada, speaking to Inuits or Eskimos, native people there, who live in the cold most of the year. Imagine him talking about islands and palm trees and coconuts and coral reefs and clownfishes. What sense will it make? Obviously, here it's a proclamation to people who understand the bulk of farming and who are doing it themselves, because it is what it said in the proclamation. Have you seen that which you sow? It means that the audience is sowing the grain itself, and that's the same here. In the verse in Surah 40, in Surah 80, how we poured down water into it, then we broke open the earth, splitting it with sprouts, and caused to grow within it grain and grapes and herbage and olive and palm trees and gardens and so on, and fruit and grass as enjoyment for you and your grazing livestock. So it's the you here. It's not the whole of humanity. It's the Meccan audience. Supposedly a Meccan audience.
I think part of the irony, if I can get in, part of the irony or the ridiculousness of the situation is that these are people who probably would have had no difficulty in talk of angels or jinn or magical creatures like that, or ruined civilizations. These people are probably okay with angels and jinn and gods and demons, but these are people who would have been totally confused by what a pomegranate was. How do you tell somebody down in the Hijaz, oh yeah, it's got a pomegranate, if you have no idea what a pomegranate is? Why would you? It just seems a crazy thing.
I mean,
or a river for that matter. There are plenty of rivers in the Quran, but as I understand it, there are no rivers on the Arabian Peninsula. They don't waterfalls, and it lies where it falls, and then it disappears. It doesn't flow anywhere.
Right. I mean, less than 4% of the people in the Quran are pagans. 96% of them are biblical characters. And Thunderous One makes a good point. Jesus always spoke in farming parables. This is what the community understood and could relate to. So the Quran obviously imitates that, tries to borrow that and give itself credibility.
Exactly. This is this is what Patricia
for what it's worth, I completely agree with what Thunderous One says.
But the thing here I wanted to pinpoint is that it is not a vague and general proclamation. It is addressed to the people who are listening to it. It talks about your grazing livestock, which implies that the audience has some livestock that can graze. Or there are no pastures in Mecca. You might have some livestock. For example, a few camels there. Why not? But you will have to get the what do they eat? The fennel? What's the name for it? Fourrage. You will have to get the food from elsewhere because it doesn't grow in Mecca. You will have to go to maybe Taif to get some straws or anything that the camels are eating. But the camels, anyhow, they need pastures. They need fresh grass. Otherwise, they cannot. They won't live very long. Yeah, the gardens are orchards, sort of.
By the way, I looked at all the scholars of Islam. Everyone did not tell us except Al-Qurtubi, and he mentioned Al-Madinah, which is Yathrib, north of Mecca.
Yeah, but Yathrib is also a city north of Baghdad.
Yeah, Usama, your point is that these verses are identified as Medinan verses? Last time I checked, they were Meccan verses.
Oh, no, I'm not talking about that. I can tell you exactly in a second here where this chapter was written. So Yasin, and I go to Al-Jalalain, and he tell me it's a Meccan chapter, except the verses 45. The only verse is written in Medina is verse 45. So the entire chapter was written in Mecca, and it was written after Surah Al-Jinn.
So you're just making my point. These verses, according to the Islamic narrative, are supposed to be Meccan verses proclaimed in Mecca. So not in Medina, they were proclaimed to Meccans. And we have other verses. It's not only these ones. If you look at this one, for example.
Yeah.
Could I share a slide just on this point?
Of course.
Just for a second. Here we are. Of course, it'll be slow now that I'm. Can you see that?
Give me 1 second.
I can see nothing. Cool. Now I see grapes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Thank you.
I just put this question into Google earlier today. Where do grapes, olives, and pomegranates grow? And it's clearly they're Mediterranean. And I think you could put all the different animals that are mentioned, plants that are mentioned, etc., into a computer, and what would come out would be a Mediterranean climate. You wouldn't you might get some of them far south, maybe, but to get all of them, you're dealing with a Mediterranean climate, particularly grapes. It can't be not too hot, not too cold. It's a bit like Goldilocks. I just thought I'd share that with you.
No, not the temperature, also the type of ground. We have all that in Egypt because we got the right ground to grow it. You cannot grow any of these in the sand of Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
It is not going to work.
Yeah. I mean, when I lived in Dubai, one of the biggest import into Dubai apparently was sand, because the sand is too thin, so they needed sand for construction.
Wow.
And Mel, there's a comment here about Let's Map dialects, and I think can you just check that and see if anything stands out to you there? It's in the comments. I just have it on the screen there.
Is it the one about the orchard?
Yeah, I think garden should be translated to orchard. In Maltese, we don't make distinction between garden and orchard. All are Janine.
I would think of the word paradise, which I believe is Persian originally, which is the concept of heaven as a walled garden, which perhaps brings the two concepts together. So it has a metaphorical sense as well as a direct sense. So it can be used in two senses: a religious sense and in a literal sense.
Yeah, all the heavenly imagery in Islam is taken essentially from the Persian view. So
Yeah. And what's his name? Saint Ephraim. It's an awful lot of it's borrowed directly from Saint Ephraim.
No. Mhm. Anyway, Mel, you'll see I've quoted Patricia Krone's article in the presentation. She made the same point as you, and even a more detailed point, as we will see. Let's look at these other verses about Meccan farmers.
Yeah.
So it talks about here in Surah 6, verse 136 to 144. So it's not the complete quotation. I've done some selections. It talks about the mushrikun, polytheists. So the ones that are supposed to live in Mecca. The associationists, according to the Islamic narrative, the pagan Meccans. And those Meccans assigned to God from that which he created of crops and livestock, a share and say, and so on. And they say, these animals, these crops. So the Meccans had crops. So they were farming something. And what were they farming? They had gardens in which they grew palm trees, crops of different kinds of food, and olives and pomegranates. They had grazing livestock, again, of sheep, goats, camels. So we see what is the exact nature of their farming activity, what they are growing, what kind of livestock they had. And it is completely impossible to have such things in Mecca.
yeah.
The same with other verses about the grazing livestock he created for the Meccans.
Remember we said palm trees require something like 180 liters per tree per day when grown.
Yeah.
Olive
Maybe
trees
a bit less,
require something like
it
70
pumped
liters.
into the underground water.
Yeah, olive trees require something like 70 to 80 liters a week, multiplied by 4. So you still require several hundred liters a month for these trees. I mean, so just looking, if they had farms with olives and palms, and it's a huge population, lots of farming, that's a lot of water they need to justify.
Think how much plantation sheep and goats would clear in just a few days. You need an awful lot of land to keep them satisfied. That's why shepherds walked sheep and goats up into the mountains and far away, because they would just eat so many acres, so it's an impossible.
Yeah, and then you might remember from my previous presentation, I made an argument by taking the example of a 500 people population, and how many sheep and goats would such a population need in order to survive? It's at least 500 plus camels, plus a bit of culture also. When you have 500 sheep, you need huge grazing lands for them, because if you try to have them grazing in the vicinity of Mecca, you will find only very sparse vegetation, thorns, very little grass or no grass at all. And so you will have to take them across huge distances to get them the food they need. And it's not possible. They will die along the way.
Yeah.
So they cannot be bred in Mecca.
I just shared a slide there, which is I did an investigation of the rainfall in Mecca versus the typical evaporation in a desert like Mecca. And so in terms of inches of rain in Mecca in a year, it's 5 inches. The amount of evaporation that would happen in a year is 118 inches. That'll give you an idea that you just haven't a hope of growing in those sort of conditions where it's just arid and dry.
No, in order to survive with such a climate, you have to have a very sophisticated water system where you collect rainfall, you store them for the whole year. But
So you
when
need
you look at
dams,
the numbers,
you need
it's not
canals.
enough. It's not
And
enough.
also-
I showed you in the previous video examples of floods, and one could get the idea. Oh, there is so much water. There is water enough for the whole year. But like you put it, most of it is evaporated, and the rest is it's simply not enough for the basic needs of any settlement.
Mhm.
Olives also require Mediterranean climate, which Mecca
Yeah.
absolutely cannot provide. It has no soil. And then also the text speaks about trellised gardens. Remember I showed last week, for instance, they have these trellised gardens in Yemen. I'm not saying that Mecca is exclusively in Yemen, because clearly the geography generally fits the Levant. But they've maybe taken pieces of that, because you've got exactly that kind of farming just south in Yemen.
Mhm.
Nothing, it doesn't fit at all. I mean, there is
Yeah.
no way Mecca
There's-
did or can support that without
But the-
modern methods and huge investment.
Another thing about the soil, it's so sandy that they have low water holding capacity,
Yeah.
which means that the water evaporates on the surface much more easily than typical soil that you'd find elsewhere. So that's another problem.
Yeah, I mean,
May I add something? So all of this is not just a historical problem that we're looking at the 7th century and we're saying, well, you see, these things couldn't be there. They couldn't be there even nowadays. Like
Yeah.
these problems are still there and we can see it with our own eyes. And Lloyd, I think you have some good pictures of Mecca from like 100 years ago. Maybe if at one point you can actually show them so that people can see visually how Mecca is not what is described in this narrative. That might be useful.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'll try and find
I've
those.
seen such pictures. We see that the place is completely desolate, barren, dry, completely dry. But if you look at the movie, The Message, the movie about Muhammad's life, that is very successful among Muslims. Mecca is, you see palm trees in Mecca, for example, in this movie. But it has not been shot in the actual Mecca. It has been shot in, I think, in Northern Africa, in places where palm trees can grow. But this is how Muslims are sort of gaslighted. Yeah, let's look at the rest of the presentation about the farmers. Yeah, this was the conclusion, which I already spoke about. The preacher is supposed to speak to people about what they are familiar with. So when he speaks about grapevines or palm trees that are watered with one water, it means that this is what the Meccans are doing, or they cannot do this in Mecca. When he speaks about parables, agricultural parables, he speaks about things that his audience can relate to. This is what I said. You won't have a preacher coming to Greenland and making parables about islands and coconuts. It cannot be. And so since there couldn't have been any culture of grain, dates, olive, vines, pomegranate, palm trees in Mecca, one is forced to conclude that it's not about Mecca, it's about somewhere else. And this is Patricia Krone's conclusion in her article. The answer one would have expected the exegetes to come up with is that the passages concerning agriculture refer to places outside Mecca, and above all, Taif, where the Meccans own gardens. What other solution could there be? It works up to a point too. For date palms, pomegranates, and grapes all fit in effortlessly at Taif. Grain and olives are more of a problem, however. they are the problem, the issue. The issue here is the mix of culture. Such a mix of culture also could not have take place in Taif. It was somewhere else. And like she explained, after the conquest, when Muawiyah and other wealthy Qurayshis began a massive agricultural development of the Hijaz, grain came to be harvested there on a major scale. It could perhaps be argued that some was grown there before the rise of Islam as well, but the tradition invariably associates grains with Syria. After the conquest, there may, for all we know, have been attempts at olive cultivation in the Hijaz too, but if there were, they did not succeed for obvious reason. In its cultivated form, the olive is a tree adapted to Mediterranean conditions. So the mix of culture points to the Mediterranean borders or the Mediterranean region. So I don't know about Yemen here, whether there are olive trees in Yemen. So about your Yemeni hypothesis, Lloyd. But the conclusion is that this type of cultures points to the Levant, actually. And it has nothing to do with Mecca.
Yemen is not big on olives. It is considered a strategic crop that has been adopted, but I don't think it was originally something that they focused on. I think it's a fairly new form of farming.
So one has to come to the conclusion, the same as Patricia Krohn. These verses, I'm not talking about the whole of the Quran, but these verses addressed Levantine audience. And other verses, the one who talks about fishing, add up to this conclusion. Because there are other proclamations supposedly done to the Meccans that depict them as fishermen. So the question is, how could one fish anything in Mecca?
Before you go on to the fishing, can I
Yeah.
bring something else up here, which I think is important?
Yeah.
I don't know if you've mentioned.
Syria has an ancient tradition of olives. I'll bring it up in a moment now.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There you go, Mel.
Am I free to go? So I think this line here in verse 141 of Surah 6 could easily be overlooked. Eat of the fruit they bear and pay the Jews at harvest, but do not waste. If we're talking about things that are grown in a place like Mecca, even if you grant them that they could grow it, do you think it would be necessary to tell the people there, don't waste your food? That doesn't sound like a desert area to me. That sounds like a place where food grows easily and plentifully, such that you have to advise them not to waste their food. I thought I'd share that there.
Brother Paul, he have his hands up, guys.
Oh, Paul, please. You're on mute again, Paul.
Hi. I made a couple of observations. One is whilst we're just going through these verses, there's another one that I think is relevant. That it's not just the locutus of the Quran addressing his audience who talks about gardens and pomegranates and this and that. It's also what they say to him. Because Surah 25, verse 8, verses 7 and 8 reads, "And they say, what ails this messenger who eats food and walks in the market? Why was there not an angel sent down to him to be a warner with him? Or no treasure cast unto him? Or no garden for him from which to eat?" So that seems to be that the Quran is recording his audience of essentially mocking him or disbelieving him because he hasn't been given a garden, which is just the most bizarre thing for somewhere like Mecca. It's like saying, "Well, who are you? Because you don't have a garden in your house." Well, it might might be a response to in some places in the English countryside, but it wouldn't be much of a reason for disbelieving somebody in an atmosphere where surely at best 1 or 2 people, or maybe a dozen, might have had gardens. This treats it as though it's something to be expected of him. So I thought I'd just mention that it's not just the prophet talking to the people, it's all the people answering him back and saying, you don't have a garden. The other point, I don't know if it's leaping possibly ahead to the conclusion, but we kind of tiptoed over the line once or twice, so I'll offer it now. And it's based upon one of the comments made earlier by Thunderous One, where he said, surely it's all talking about it's all talking about the Holy Land, it's talking about Palestine. Because what we know is that the Quran author or authors sees things very much through a biblical lens. The frequent references to the prophets and kings and patriarchs of the Bible, also reads Gabriel Said Reynolds as perhaps the best of the professional academics to talk about this. All the many turns of phrase that are used in the Quran that are also found in the Bible. And it occurs to me that verses such as those that Odon has read out, and I think my favorite, which is on this point, which is Surah 6, verse 99. I'll just read it. And he it is who sends down water from the sky. Thereby we bring forth the shoot of every plant. We bring forth vegetation, from which we bring forth grain in close packed rows, and from the date palm, and from its sheath, clusters of dates hanging low, and gardens of grapes, olives, and pomegranates, like unto one another, and yet not alike. Look upon their fruits as they grow and ripen. Truly, there are signs for a people who believe. And it sounds to me, this, first of all, sounds rather paradisical. It doesn't even sound as though it's a regular fertile land. It sounds as though the person is making it sound very grandiose and celebrating the fecundity of nature. And it strikes me that it puts me in mind of Book of Deuteronomy, chapter 8, where it says, for Yahweh, your God, is bringing you into a good country, a land with streams of water, with springs and fountains welling up in the hills and valleys, a land of wheat and barley, of vines and fig trees and pomegranates, of olive trees and honey, a land where you can eat bread without stint and where you will lack for nothing, a land whose stones contain iron and in whose hills you can mine copper. And it seems that if one reads the whole of the Quran, the gist of the Quran is not to just refer to things that are around him and just point at them almost at random. Everything in the Quran seems to have a strong biblical echo, biblical allusion. And when he's describing this wonderful landscape with all these plants and the fertile land that has been provided, he is borrowing the sorts of language, the sorts of imagery that are used in the Old Testament to describe, particularly the Pentateuch, to describe the promised land that the children of Israel are going to be led into. And I'm completely with Thunderous Ones and some of the other comments that have been made, that this looks as though it's a reference. It looks as though it's a reference to the promised land. It's not just a random place.
I would add that pomegranates have a very strong messianic history, so that could have a symbolic meaning. The palm trees are associated with Mary as well, the Marian dimension that's in the Quran. Perhaps there are some of those that are representative of Aaron to go with David. So there could be other layers to all of this as well, the particular choice of fruit and plants that they focus in on.
I'd like to show something.
Just before, can I answer the point? I agree with you, Paul. But you see, I haven't quoted the this verse that you quoted, because my selection is about verses that are directly addressed to the audience, and this is the point I wanted to make here. Here, in the verses I showed, I don't think it's about the promise of a future garden or future gardens in a promised land. Really, the preacher is talking to his audience about things they are doing. They are sowing the grain, sowing, excuse me, not sowing, sowing the grain. They have they harvest. They are harvesting their gardens.
Yeah.
In other
I
verses,
see your
such as
point.
the one you
I see your point.
referred to, there might be a biblical tone, of course. I agree. I fully agree. But here, in these verses, it's real. It's happening.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And the problem is, if you don't mind, I share this quickly. Whenever whoever is writing the Quran, he does not really have a logic of what land he's talking about. I mean, he is what they call a little geography guy. Because, for example, if you go to Quran chapter 95, and the verses 1 and 2, and if we look at the interpretation of Al-Jalalain, for example, you will see that Muhammad here is talking about Mount Sinai. And he described it, and he's adding to it the fig and the olives. Well, and as you read, even I can, this is very simple interpretation of Al-Jalalain. He is really foolish. He said, وَطُورُ السِّنِينَ, that is the word we mentioned, Al-Jabal الَّذِي كَرَّمَ اللَّهُ تَعَالَى, it is the mountain which Allah exalted, spoke with him, Moses. وَمَعْنَا سِنِينَ al-Mubarak, the word Sinin is the blessed one, or the one which is good with the trees, with the fruitful trees. I mean, Muhammad does not know anything about Mount Sinai. His scholar Al-Jalalain does not have a jack or a clue about what Sinai is, because it's, as I said in our last program, it's a granite mountain. You don't even see grass grow, not trees, fruitful trees. So I hate to say that even when Muhammad mentioned a specific mountain, Mount Sinai, talking about Moses, and he talked about the figs and the olive trees, I'm sorry. That does not make any sense. Does not make any sense.
Mm-hmm.
You see, you point at something I should have cleared before. The verses I quoted, I took it for granted that they are sort of verbatim of a proclamation that was done by a preacher to people. The Surah 95 you quoted, it's something of a different genre. The preacher is addressing an audience, but he is using ground references, the Mount Sinai, the fig, the olive, the secure city, and so on. It's not the same as engaging an audience with things she is doing, things the audience is doing, like harvesting its crops.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the same genre, and that's one of the difficulties of the Quran. It's that it is very heterogeneous. It is not the same genre everywhere. Sometimes we have verses like the one I quoted. Sometimes we have prayers. Sometimes we have apocalyptical warnings. And Surah 94 is much more an apocalyptical warning than a parable or an exhortation to an actual working, farming, and fishing audience.
Mm-hmm.
Can I add something here as well? There's a reference in 6141. Talks about gardens, but it distinguishes both cultivated and wild. Now, you could argue that maybe with technology you could cultivate a garden in Mecca, but I doubt you could have a wild garden in Mecca, which rules it out as a possible location.
Yeah.
I want to show something, if I may. This is something that I found originally by myself right after, literally seconds after JC showed it to me. So it's something that I. So this is the travels of Ludovico de Vartema, an Italian who traveled extensively, and he faked himself as being Muslim, and he ended up in Mecca in the 1500s. And this is a fantastic find, and I'm so glad that I found it literally moments after I was shown this by JC, because I have. Anyway, moving on. So he ends up in Mecca. This is his stuff here, and he ends up going to see the Kaaba. Okay, so he ends up going to see the Kaaba, and let me just get to the page. If I recall, it's page 203. And then I want to show you something else here. So it's going to be, give me a second. So he goes to Mecca, and then eventually he has to escape because they get onto him, and he eventually escapes. He gets out. Now he says here the chapter concerning the merchandising in Mecca, or the merchandise in Mecca, right? And he says the merchandise comes from many parts. From India, there comes jewels and spices, right? Part comes from Ethiopia, right? From India major. And then the chapter concerning the pardoning in Mecca. So he speaks of the Mecca, and he says here, which is really odd. Now let us turn to the pardoning of the said pilgrims. In the midst of the city, there's a very beautiful temple, similar to the Colosseum of Rome, but not made of such large stones, but of burnt bricks. And it is round in the same manner. It has 90 or 100 doors around it, and is arched and has many of these doors. And it says here, on entering the said temple, you descend 10 or 12 steps of marble, and here and there about the side entrance there stand men who sell jewels and nothing else. Looks like Jesus needs to get himself a whip and come and do some business here, right?
Yeah.
And then he says, and under the said arches, there are about 4,000 or 5,000 people. Truly, it would not be possible to describe the sweetness and the odors which are smelt in this temple. It's like a spicery full of musk, right? On the 23rd of May, the said pardon commences in the above-mentioned temple. But then he says this, right? Then he says this really odd thing. Within the temple and uncovered and in the center, there is a tower, the size of which is about 5 or 6 paces on every side.
Mm-hmm.
A tower of 5 or 6 paces, around which tower there is, right? Even Burkhart's mentioned it. Burkhart is the guy who came up with the name Makuraba. And around the tower, there's a cloth of black silk. And there's a door the height of a man in which can enter the tower. The tower is 5 or 6. Now let's, sorry, go on. Yeah,
that would be 30 square meters, just as a rough measure there based on the description.
5 or 6 paces on every side. So let's have a look. This tower, would you agree that this tower is 5 or 6 paces on every side? Roughly.
Yeah, could be.
This is a Kaaba of Zoroaster.
Yeah.
No?
This is a Kaaba.
Are you sure Ludovicus went to Mecca and not to Iran?
That's what he says, I know. But he speaks about this. He goes and he escapes and whatnot. And but yeah, it's just odd. And I want to whites only permitted in Mecca. Sorry, Muslims only. My gosh, growing up under
Yep, it's you cannot go there. Only Muslims can get there.
Yeah, which just shows how inclusive Islam is. Of course, there's the beauty of Islam and the Kaaba. This is from a movie.
Yeah,
right?
The message.
These are views.
If you zoom in, you will find maybe the palm trees there.
Yeah. Now we'll show you this. I mean, I have this video I have available. I'll show that in a moment, but let me skip. So these are pictures. There are some old pictures of legitimate photos of Mecca. Here you go. These are some examples. I'll look at some larger pictures in a minute. Here you can see it is barren. This is like Oman. I've been to Oman, and this is barren. You can see the changes as this took place, right? To more than one story, old. Look at this. Arches, and then multiple, and then it gets, then you can start to see the city develops over time. This is the oldest known photograph, I believe, of the Kaaba, right? In Mecca, you can see here the changes as they take place, right? This is Sadiq Bey, and then here you've got different views. As you can see, it's extremely
It looks like it's constantly changing.
Yes,
It
yes.
is.
You'll see here. You'll notice here how they start to change this. They start to change the ground around it.
Looks like a race course there.
And then notice this is the Jamarat pillar for stoning the devil. Okay, this is where they used to stone the devil, right? Now notice where this pillar is today.
No, not today. Today it's something else.
Yeah, but look at it now. Look at it here. Notice that these two locations are not the same. Unless I'm missing something, this in the middle of the market is not this location.
Yeah, I agree, but they replaced the one in the middle of the garden with the 3 huge walls.
Yeah, but notice they had it. Looks like this was the thing, then this became the thing, and now they've got a different thing.
Yeah, it's
Right.
different locations. Like.
But it's
'Cause you
always
can see here,
changing. But
this-
there's a reason for it. What's the date of the?
Yeah, but
of
notice
the-
the thing is, we didn't take Jesus's tomb and say, Jesus, we're getting too many people visiting. Let's move Jesus's tomb 500 meters east and stick it over there. And now that's the original tomb, right? All I'm saying is this was the original stone that they threw stones at. Then
Can
it
you
became
zoom
this
this
guy.
picture, Brother Lloyd? Go up again, please. Zoom the picture a little bit. Can you make it bigger? You know what's written on the red container and the red thing in the top there?
What's it saying?
Coca-Cola.
Right?
No way.
Yeah, but it's a shop. It's it was.
Yeah, but
So you can see this guy, like, people are throwing stuff. You can see they're throwing things here. Yeah, so they have a Coke and a throw, right? Because people are throwing. You can see here, this one's throwing, she's throwing.
The man
So
is
they're
selling
throwing-
Coca-Cola. Yeah. Anyway.
So here they were throwing stuff. So I'm guessing that this is the same thing but replaced. You can see it here now. I don't know whatever that is. Okay,
No, it's
Then-
something else.
probably something else. Okay, maybe something else. Fine, but then this is
where
some of the
the
terrain.
camels were grazing.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
notice.
the green grass.
That is the building which was built on the top of the Zamzam. Where
Okay.
Rahman
Okay,
al-Mataf,
the building on top
and you have them
This
before it was destroyed in 1383 Hijriyan, a good 100
Okay.
years ago.
Okay, fine. Then this here is the original Kaaba door. One of the there's been 12 Kaaba doors apparently. This is one of the older ones. Now look here. You can see they're making changes. It's changing. It's changing. This is the floods that happened in Mecca. These people are up to their waist in water, right? Now you can see that this place has changed a lot over time. It has changed significantly. Now you can see they're starting to make additional changes. Now the door changes. You can see that's different. I'll just run through that.
Yeah. And
So
the
the-
Saudis,
now
the
it's like
Saudis, they are
this today. This
replacing
is
the
nothing
stone,
like
for
that.
example.
Sorry?
The image you see here, the stones are not the same as the Kaaba from 30 or 40 years before.
Yeah.
Because the Saudis are replacing the stones.
Yeah, they're
Yeah.
replacing the whole building, right?
And you saw Maqam Abraham. You saw the Maqam Abraham above there.
Yeah.
Go up a little. Yep. See the gold building? No. Go down. Down one more. Next picture. You see the gold building in the back there?
Yep.
On the right.
That is the place of Abraham.
Yeah, where he stood on the stones. Yeah, exactly. And this has changed as well. Whatever that originally was, it's not the same. Not the same now.
Yeah.
So you can see this is clearly something has been changing a lot here. Something's been
Yeah.
changing significantly here. This is
But
not
do
the
we
same.
see any trees, Brother Lloyd? Do we see any grass? Do we see any trees? Do we see anything?
Yeah, look over
Yeah,
here. You
yeah,
can see there's like palm trees, there's olive trees, there's goats on the mountain.
I see
There's
it. I can. Yep. Mm-hmm.
There's
Yeah.
a Chinese, just to add a little bit more to this, there's a Chinese source from 1433 AD, Ying Yai Sheng Lan, talking about Mecca. And it mentions behind the grave of Muhammad is a spring of pure and sweet water named Abi Sansan, which is taken to be the Zamzam. Men who go to foreign parts take this water and store it at the sides of their ships. If they meet a typhoon at sea, they take this water and scatter it, and water and waves are lulled. But the key thing there is the fact that in the 15th century, they were saying that Muhammad was buried in Mecca, which I don't think is the belief that they have today.
No, Muhammad is married in Medina.
Yeah.
Wow.
So,
Interesting remark. But,
Maybe
Lloyd,
he's
I want
married
to
both
tell,
Mecca and Medina. That will make him even greater prophet.
Oh. Something to underline here. There was a major flood in the 17th century, around 1630 or 1631. A major flood that destroyed the Kaaba, and it was rebuilt 2 or 3 years later, completely from the ground up. There were Egyptian workers who were brought there, and they scraped everything underneath up to the barren rock. So the Kaaba we see today has nothing to do with Muhammad's Kaaba. Of course, it's been changed by the Saudis, but even when the Saudis took control of Mecca, the Kaaba that was there was already a new building. So this is what is very, very strange in Islam. They seem to cling on history. They have an historical background that is very rich in Mecca. Everything is deeply rooted in history, but everything is destroyed, has been replaced. Everything has changed. And so it's a bit like in the novel 1984. The past is always changing, but it's still the past for Muslims. They still believe it is the past. And this is how they are manipulated, like in the novel, George Orwell's novel.
But brother, if the Kaaba was built originally by Adam, it has to be at least 10 times bigger than what we see it today.
Yeah,
otherwise, how can Adam go inside it, 90 feet tall guy, go inside the building like what, 20 feet high, 30 feet high? It does not make any sense. In my house, the roof is 10 feet above my head, you know?
But the Kaaba is one of the only, maybe the only building in the world in which you are not supposed to enter.
Yeah.
So why you build it?
Yeah. I mean, this picture of Mecca, I mean, what is this?
No, it's built in the desert.
It's barren rock. It may as well be built on the moon. I mean, look at this.
Do you know what? Do you know what Al-Tabari called Zoroastrians? Do you know that?
For us?
He called them Zamzama.
Oh, yes.
Zamzama.
And you know, I'll just show you if I may just slide here.
What chapter, what verse do you know, Odon?
I have it here. I'll show you now.
Oh, well.
All right.
Zamzama. In early Arabic, the confused noise of distant thunder, but widely used in the sources for early Islamic history for the priests of the Magians reciting and intoning Zoroastrian prayers and scriptures, producing to the Arabs' ears an indistinct droning sound. Thus, in Al-Tabari, 1042, we have the Zamzama of the Herbads. In 2874, the Muzamzim, or adherent of Zoroastrianism. And in 2880, Zamzama for the Zoroastrian rites. So it kind of fits with what you said, Lloyd, earlier about how the tower resembled a Zoroastrian building.
Tower, yeah. Kaaba, Zoroastrian Kaaba.
Be. I think it has to do, but you know this, Mel. In Hebrew, there is a verb that is very close to Zamzam. It's like Zimzim or Zamzam. I don't remember exactly.
Humming. It means humming, yeah.
And it means humming, like the water hums, the water from a source hums.
Yeah. There's two options there, but I think the Zoroastrian one, for me, makes a lot more sense.
Yeah,
but,
because there's another reference in the Kaaba in the Quran to, it makes indirect references, but there's one that it mentions. JC and I looked at a couple of days ago, where they mention the people of the flame, right? And it speaks of the woman who goes to collect firewood, and it's a very arbitrary reference. Like his wife will go collect firewood, but you had the priests who were the keepers of the flame. They would wear the cord around their waist, and he says the cord will be around their necks, And then, so it references the cord, the braided cord, and it references she collects the firewood, which was her task to keep the sacred flame alive. Because you had these priest pairs. Yeah, go ahead.
And also the jinn are made out of fire, which would be a Zoroastrian concept as well. And the jinn, in some contexts, look like human beings. If you read certain verses in the Quran, which I don't have to hand, but
yeah. And Paul's going to say something. Paul, were you going to say something? You had your finger up for a second, or your hand up?
I don't think Paul can hear us.
Hi, yeah. Just to say, I'm having a little bit of difficulty hearing you. I guess everybody else is okay. It must just be my ancient computer. I have my own thesis on Surah Al-Masad, the gentleman with the father of the flame. Abu
Lahab.
I'm with
Abu Lahab,
I forgot the gentleman's name now. Beck. Daniel Beck says that the early surahs are strongly influenced by anti-Sasanian polemic.
Yes,
he says
that
the people of the flame is a mocking reference to Khusro II, because he was a Zoroastrian and the importance of fire within Zoroastrianism. And he says that's what people would understand in the first 3 decades of the 7th century. That's what people would think of. It would be like somebody in the 1930s making something about the man of the mustache. They wouldn't need to explain it. Everybody would get the reference. With regards to his wife, the wood bearer, that's a rather strange thing. It's rather thrown in there, isn't it? One doesn't expect to see when you're laying into somebody in the Quran, in a religious text, to basically say, oh, and his terrible wife too. And it's a rather odd thing to refer to her as the wood bearer. But I believe that I have found the answer to this. I had a look at the wives of Khusro, and there's one, his most famous and most prominent wife is called Shirin. And Shirin was a Christian, and I found, I think no less than 3. I'm not sure whether it's 2 or 3, but there are at least 2 totally independent stories that when Khusro got the cross from Jerusalem, seized the cross, the relic of the one true cross, and took it back to Persia, that he gave it to Shirin, and that Shirin was the guardian of the cross for a time. And so it makes perfect sense that if you're talking about Khusro as the father of the flame, and you would say, and his wife, the wood bearer, that the author is making a reference to the fact that his wife happens to be one of the only women in history to be famous for her possession of a piece of wood.
Yeah, I came upon, I'm just double checking, but I came upon a reference that you'd have these couples who basically, as you say, it's a satire or an insult, right, of religious duty. So it's mocking them in a disparaging way, right? But it would seem that you would have, so the wood was sacred, right, in Zoroastrianism, and you'd have the wife role, basically a domestic priestess, right, the wife of the god or whatever, right, like a nun, essentially. So you had the male and you had the woman, and the lay woman is responsible for keeping the home fire pure. She feeds the dry wood, she feeds the incense, and so her religious function is to keep the flame alive as well. So that could also be a mocking reference to the Zoroastrians.
Yeah, maybe. Well, very interesting remarks. But what about our Meccan fishermen?
Yeah, well, I mean, I brought my fishing rod. I'm going to Mecca because Islam is inclusive for everybody, so anyone can go.
It's very inclusive.
Fishing rod. I'm going to get some fish. I want to bring you back a salmon.
You can farm, you can fish, you can trade. There's room for everyone. And as we will see, the Quran has the same trait as with the farmers. It depicts supposedly the ones that are listening to the proclamations as some of them as being fishermen. There are many references in the Quran to sailing to the sea and so on. Some of the people, some of the audience rode on ships and were guided by stars on land and sea. So one could argue that in Mecca, maybe because it was such a huge hub and there were so many people coming from all over Arabia, there might have been fishermen. And this is why the preacher, Muhammad, used references to sailing. But the thing
there's a solution to this, because camels are called the ships of the desert for the simple reason that they're filled with Arabian seamen.
But here it's clearly about sailing in boats with sails.
That was an off-color joke, by the way.
So that the ship may sail at his command, and so you may seek of his bounty. Okay.
Bounty,
but
yeah.
Here it's something else. You see, you the audience, you see the ships going through, so that you may seek of his bounty. His bounty might be the fishes that the fishermen fish.
Or the jury.
Again, it's addressed to the audience. There is a you. You see the ships. It is he who makes the ships sail on the sea, so that you, the audience, you, my brave Meccan, you may seek of his bounty, with variants in other verses. And there is also description of people being caught in storms at sea. So there is this many references to sailing, to fishing, and they are addressed to an actual audience who fishes and sails. And furthermore, it is said that this audience eats from it's the product of its own fishing. You eat from the sea tender meat, and you extract ornaments which you wear. The ornaments could have been pearls, for example. But it is speaking here also of not dried fish or dried dried sea. How do you call it? You eat fish, but also I don't have the word for it. Shells and so on. The many products of the sea. They are described as being tender. And if you look at the location of Mecca, there is a 3 to 4 days walk from the sea to Mecca. So you cannot eat fresh fish in Mecca, not tender meat as it is described in the Quran. Yeah. So it means.
Odi, brother, in the interpretation of Al-Tabari to Quran 16:14, he's talking about fresh water and salt water.
Yeah, there is this subject also.
You need rivers. I do not know where can we find some rivers in Mecca.
Yeah. There is also this issue. Let's get to it, because the Quran proclamation to the Meccans depicts them as fishing in 2 seas.
Yeah,
and they are making use of the resources of both a sea of fresh water and a sea of salt water.
Yeah, and because you can say they went to the Red Sea and catch some fish from Mecca to the Red Sea, but I do not know where can he find some rivers between Mecca and anywhere else near it.
It's not about rivers. It's about a large body of water, a large body of fresh water, a lake, a big lake.
Ponds, lakes, rivers. Yeah.
But even without the reference to the fresh water, I don't think it is possible in the 7th century to have fresh fish in Mecca taken from the Red Sea, which has to be brought on camel's back It takes 4 days in harsh climate.
They have these freezers.
The fish can remain fresh, and the meat
fresh
tender,
because they put
maybe.
brother. They put them on the freezers in the back of the camels, and by the time they get to Mecca, the fish still fresh. You know.
Can I just jump in? I've seen what they do in Portugal with fish. They cut them in half and they hang them for days and dry them out. So I don't think that's in itself a problem. But I think just in general, I think it does suggest that we're dealing with a coastal location, and Mecca is definitely not a coastal location. So I think if we go back to the original ideas we have of a northern narrative going on, for example, it's easy to find potential locations where you can find fresh water and seawater.
Yeah, even in
I've got pictures of this location to show you.
Fish from even in Madrid, even the 1500s, 1600s, 1800s, they had a problem getting fish from the coast to Madrid. If they had a problem doing that in Europe, then Mecca in the 7th century, no way. Sorry, Odon?
May I add something? So, as you know, I try to read the Quran in a neutral fashion, just removing the standard Islamic narrative. And I've never explored these verses, but the moment that Odon said earlier, fishermen of Mecca, the first thing that jumped into my mind, the moment he said fishermen, was the apostles. Like immediately, like Peter, there are lots of stories about that. So maybe it has nothing to do. Maybe it has nothing to do with that, and it is another preacher in the area just telling people who are fishermen and stuff. But maybe some of those verses are a direct link to Peter and so on. Maybe so, more for exploring.
I noticed that there's. I noticed in the Red Sea there's a very valuable oyster called the black lip pearls. It's one of the largest pearls that you can get. So it may not necessarily be away from the Red Sea. The Aqaba could be a good location where a lot of things meet.
We'll see.
Wasn't it part of the cosmology of the ancient world? They thought that there were two bodies of water outside of the earth, as it were. That you had the fresh water up in the heavens where it comes down as rain, and you have the salt water on which the earth is floating. And so they've just been referring to those as the two seas, the two bodies of water.
No, Brother Paul and Muhammad talk about the two sea fresh water. They talk about the barrier between them. Yeah. And that is some of the things which Muslims try to say today, that how did Muhammad know the barrier between the fresh and the salt water? Obviously, something was known 500 years before Muhammad, was a gleam in his father's eyes by some of the scientists who know it and describes it. So
I want to address that. But first, let's look at what the Quran says about these two seas. In verse 12, Surah 35, the proclamation goes, and not alike are the two bodies of water. Please here note that this is the dual form of the word al-Barani. It's not just two bodies; it's the dual form. It can only be two. One is fresh and sweet, palatable for drinking and so on, and one is salty and bitter. And from each you eat tender meat and extract ornaments which you wear. And you see the ships plowing through them, that you may take of his bounty, and perhaps you will be grateful. So here, the audience eats and fishes and from both bodies of water, and it uses resources from both bodies of water. So we have to look for a location where we have a sea water, a sea of seawater, a sea salty and bitter, and not very far from here must be a lake of fresh and sweet, palatable for drinking water. Where where do we find
can
this
do
kind
that
of
now.
There is an
configuration?
obvious thing.
Yeah, I'm sorry, brother. Go ahead.
Sorry, there is an obvious place, Bahrain, which literally is the
Yeah,
etymology
exactly.
is two seas.
Exactly.
So it could be really obvious. It mightn't be a mystery.
Exactly.
but,
I will present you the different hypotheses for this location. But it is something that is it's not only in one verse. There is other verses about these two bodies of water, the two seas, one fresh and sweet, and one salty and bitter. And there is this mention that you referred to, Usama, the barrier. He placed between them a barrier and a prohibiting partition. So the two bodies of seas are separated. There is a partition, a barrier between them. He released the two seas, meeting side by side. So it's an interpretation of the Islamic narrative. Between them is a barrier, so neither of them transgresses. So which of the favors of your Lord would you deny? And from both of them emerge pearl and coral. So
yeah, Lloyd, if you don't mind, can you read the comment I have in my Quran before that verse 50, 25, 53?
In your
If you don't mind,
Quran.
there's a bold, in the Quran 25, 53. There's a bold statement I put there. I think it's very important.
3, sorry.
It's true, yes, just a bold statement before it. I hate to lose it and don't come back to it.
I have it here. Hold on. Let me just share my screen quickly. Give me a moment. I'm just going to bring it up. Takes a moment.
It's one of the great miracle Muslims are using in the West today to prove to the world that Muhammad was a true prophet.
This one here.
No. You're not in chapter 25, bro. Chapter 25.
Oh, 25. I thought you said 55. Sorry,
55.
the audio.
55, 53.
And then you go to before verse 53. Keep going. That you got it. You got it.
This one?
Yeah.
The prophetic ability of Muhammad.
But the knowledge of the separation between fresh water and salt water was not a new discovery. Pliny the Elder, Roman naturalist, senator, and commander of the imperial fleet in the 1st century, observed this behavior of fishermen's nets in the Straits of Bosphorus near Istanbul. Been there too. I did a trip on that river, but anyway, in that area. But Pliny deduced that the surface and bottom currents were flowing in opposite directions. He provided the first written documentation of what is now called the estuarine circulation. Additionally, it can be shown from logic that the fresh and salt waters do eventually combine. If they did not, there would be huge oceans of fresh water continually growing out from every major river. Simple studies show that fresh water flowing out from rivers slowly mixes with and becomes increasingly salinated over time, and distance until it reaches equilibrium with the normal salt levels of the greater body of water. The speed of the change varies according to temperature.
Sure.
Yep. So
Nonetheless, there are some Muslims who...
Yes.
Go on, JC.
Yes, something very, very quickly that I try to say every single time for people who are not very familiar with this. So all of these things that we are saying, it is in the exegete that says that all of this is about Mecca, but the Quran never actually claims that, because Mecca is only mentioned in one place in the Quran specifically, and it has nothing to do with that. So all of this information that we are told is Mecca is because someone else, like the wonderful Ibn Kathir, tells us that it is Mecca. It's the traditions, but the Quran never really says that.
yeah, when Makaraba being Mecca only occurs in 1647 by Bochart. So that reference is only 400 years old. It's not an ancient reference. It was made up literally by a European in the 1600s.
And all of this, it's about confronting the Islamic narrative. This narrative has invented interpretation for the Quran, and when the Quran describes farmers or fishermen, this narrative posits that they are in Mecca, which is obviously not possible. So the narrative is false. It was somewhere else that these proclamations were proclaimed. So the question here is, where are the two seas? There is something to be addressed here. We already have Mel's answer, which is Bahrain, which is the exact same expression that the one we find in the Quran. One could also look at these verses as describing a body of saltwater, a saltwater sea that will be located near a freshwater sea, but separated by a dry land, a barrier, like it is said in the Quran. But yet they would be connected by rivers, for example, allowing the saltwater and freshwater seas to meet, but not to mix. And we have such configuration in the Middle East, but it is not in Mecca, it is even not in Arabia, it is in the Levant. In the Levant, for example, we have the Lake Homs, which is not very far from the Mediterranean Sea. It is also named the Katina Lake in Syria, so near Homs. We have also the Sea of Galilee, which is not very far from the Mediterranean Sea. It's only 20 kilometers. So you could have people eating fresh meat taken from the Mediterranean Sea and the Sea of Galilee.
Another
both these lakes are connected with rivers.
I don't believe Galilee myself. Why? Because it is the only body of fresh water in the earth is known by the word sea. When the writer of the Quran talk about seas, he did not say rivers and seas. He said seas. So it have to be two body of sea, salt and fresh, and it had to be the Sea of Galilee.
I'm going to throw something in here. I'm going to throw something in for a second. This also matches the Shatt al-Arab Delta in Mesopotamia. So you're looking at it like that.
It's not a sea.
But the sea, but it still matches the water, the description. It matches. You've got these two bodies.
I've looked into it, but really, Shatt al-Arab cannot be taken as a sea, a body of water.
Yeah, but he might have just misused the term or just misused it. But
besides, there is no.
But you've got the
clear partition between the Shatt al-Arab and the Persian Gulf. I really looked into it, Lloyd. I've identified every lake in the Middle East and every large body of fresh water. And so the Shatt al-Arab could be a candidate, but the thing is, there is no clear barrier between the Shatt al-Arab and the sea. and that's a thing that is very...
but do we know that these descriptions weren't added later? There was modification a century afterwards to try to get rid of the discrepancy. Understand? I mean, because the Quran wasn't finished editing until what, the 9th century, 10th century?
maybe, but I'm working on the hypothesis that we have a text that mostly dates from the 7th century. And the thing is, I'm just looking at the possibilities here. Where do we find two seas that are clearly separated, but still there is a connection between them?
Yeah, but I'm not thinking of seas. I'm just thinking two bodies of water, fresh, salty, with separation, visual separation between the two types of water. And I mean,
a connection.
You've got clear visual separation. Yeah, go on, Mel.
It could be something less dramatic. Like wherever fresh water and seawater mix, the salt water sinks because it's heavier. And so there's always a barrier. So wherever a river meets the sea, you have that phenomenon happening. And that's what creates currents in the sea. You basically have, to some extent...
But the thing is, we have different criterions in the Quran. We have to have independent bodies of water. We have to have a separation and a connection. And we also have to have boats that can be seen from the same place sailing in the fresh water and in the salt water. If we take the Quran for granted.
Well, every time, like say, I can't remember, is it the Euphrates or the Tigris that goes into the Gulf? Maybe both. But
You both get
A
together.
lot of this is the
They-
delta where they meet. Yeah.
they're literally going from fresh water to salt water there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And you know, the candidates I'm presenting to you are this one, for example. So the Dead Sea and the Sea of Galilee that are connected through the Jordan River. Also, this other one. Excuse me. I've made a mistake. I've put the same picture twice. The other candidate is also it's a Lake Homs and the Mediterranean Sea, and they are connected through the Orontes River. So there is also a connection, and the two bodies of water don't mix. But there is this last candidate that is very interesting, which is Al-Bahrain. So the Bahrain is an island on the eastern coast of Arabia, and it has been known for centuries, even in the Roman antiquity, for having an exceptional phenomenon of freshwater underground sources that flow on the beaches into the saltwater sea, and also as having submarine springs on the coast. And so here in Bahrain, for example, you can sail on a boat in the saltwater sea. You can then jump off the boat, swim a little, and go to the submarine spring on the bottom, and there you will be into fresh water.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a unique phenomenon, and it's very it has been known since the antiquity. And besides, Bahrain is also very known for its pearls and coral also. So it is a candidate to be considered for this location, for this QC's reference, and it's an even more appropriate candidate that it is the exact same expression as in the Quran.
If you look at the Shatt al-Arab and the two rivers, the Tigris and Euphrates, you've got a lot of silt in the water, and that creates a visual barrier. You've got a color separation. You've got a physical sort of barrier of silt that separates. They flow deep into the ocean before they merge. I mean, so that's also potentially. I've been to Bahrain. That's interesting.
It might be, but the thing with the Shatt al-Arab, but it's also the thing is there is no candidate that fit everything. In the Shatt al-Arab, the problem is that we don't have a body of fresh water. But one could say it's the same in Bahrain.
Two major rivers have a massive delta. I mean, it's like you've got Tigris, Euphrates, a huge delta, and then you've got ocean.
Well, yeah, I know the. I don't know the place. I've never been there, but
you definitely have
both for this presentation.
You know, so.
Yeah, it's around here, Shatt al-Arab.
Yeah.
No, you don't see it very well. No, it's around here.
Yeah, around there.
Yeah. The problem we have with Muhammad's writing, or whoever wrote the Quran, there's no details about anything. If the scholars of Islam disagree about every verse, do you think we're going to come to the conclusion what two body of waters he's talking about?
Yeah. No, the only conclusion is that it is not possible in Mecca. And this is what this presentation is about. The Meccan narrative is completely wrong.
Yeah.
I think we can agree on this conclusion.
Yeah, that's absolutely.
We might disagree whether the two seas were in Bahrain or in Palestine or in Syria or elsewhere. But one thing for sure, it cannot be in Mecca. It never was in Mecca.
Agreed.
So that will be the conclusion of the presentation about fishermen and the conclusion of the presentation about farmers and fishermen. It cannot be in Mecca. It's obvious that the Quran describes situations that cannot, that don't fit the Islamic narrative, that contradict the Islamic narrative.
Agreed. 100%. Mel, you were going to say?
I concur. You know, it's amazing. Let me say this as my last word. All my life in Egypt, I studied in schools, and I studied about Islam from actually when I was 6 years old. They start make us memorize one verse here, a small part of the Quran here and there, and all the studies I have done and all the teaching of the Muslim to me, growing up, even until when I was in college, I studied a couple of years Sharia, Islamic law. The major teaching, the biggest lie, which they have taught me, and all the Muslim students as well, that Islam started from Mecca and went from Mecca to the Saudi Arabia Peninsula, from Saudi Arabia Peninsula to the Northern Africa, and so it started from Mecca and grew up to now. I cannot find it. I cannot see it. It did not start from Mecca. It started somewhere else, and it went to Mecca. And that is a very hard thing to convince a Muslim. I mean, I am convinced with it because obviously the Spirit of God in me tell me all these things about Islam is a lie. But for Muslims who grew all their life from day one to believe it started in Mecca, went to Medina, and then back to Mecca, and from Mecca spread all over the world, how can you convince these people of that lie, which they have been taught often enough and repeated often enough, and they believe it to be a lie? It is difficult. It is hard. I mean, I don't know what Muslim we can convince that everything they know about Islam is wrong, including the birth of Islam,
but
the location
I think
of the birth.
we need to stop entertaining their doctrinal arguments, which just go in circles because you can make up any old story, and have them first justify their existence historically. Because, I mean, we are arguing here, but they haven't proven their authenticity, their authority, their origins in the first place. We shouldn't entertain them here when they haven't even, at square 5, when they haven't even established what right and authority they have at square 1.
Yeah. You know, right now, Lloyd, I'm working on bringing all the material which I've studied when I was growing up, high school or younger, about Ma'awiyah. I need to see where Ma'awiyah fit in that. And I don't know, Odi, are you going to do any teaching on Ma'awiyah and the history of Ma'awiyah and things of Islam with Ma'awiyah? Are you going to get there anywhere?
Paul might be best place for that as well.
Sorry? No, one thing we can conclude from this presentation, it was not in Mecca, for sure.
For sure,
but
I agree.
We cannot be sure that there was a unique place, because the place has to fit so many criterions. It has to be able to sustain olive trees, palm trees, pomegranates, and so on. You should be able to have cows, sheep, donkeys, horses, camels.
So it's a composite.
Okay, that's one thing. And on the other thing is it has to have fresh water, and so on.
It's a mythical.
So is it a unique place that we are looking at?
It's a mythical, perfect place. Just like all the humans are composites, they are taken from various aspects of the Bible and other sources and cobbled together. I think the geography is also to some degree a composite. So you've got exaggeration, embellishment.
There is no such place.
Correct. That's exactly the point. Because look, you've got Jerusalem. That's your template. Then they've got to create their version of it to sell the whole.
No. I don't agree. Jerusalem is not the template for the whole Quran. It's a template that we'll look at in next stream.
But
about the Jerusalem Thesis. It's a template of the place of Abraham, Safa and Marwa, and so on. But the Quran also talks. The Quran also talks about other places. It talks about the 2 seas. The 2 seas are not in Jerusalem, and Jerusalem is not a place that is very well known for its farming and its agriculture. It's not
So they take a composite and they shove things together, and boom, there you go. This place that has everything.
Sort of. But who is the they? Who is the they who take and make the composite? That's a question. And
but
these we can also deduct from this little Quranic study is that here we have some proclamations that have been made to a certain audience at a certain time. And in another part of the Quran, we have other proclamations that have been done to another audience in another place.
Yeah.
And
For
the thing
instance-
is, we are so influenced by the Islamic narrative that we want to imagine that it was only one audience in a unique place. And we have to get rid of this Islamic lens, because it is not what the Quran is about.
Yeah. But look, I mean, this description, like they speak of corals and pools and they speak of
Yeah.
fresh water. I mean, you could take two places. You could take, for argument's sake, the Shatt al-Arab and Bahrain, slam them together, and then you got coral pools and fresh water. Boom, done. I mean, you know, they could be using archetypes, because when you look at the people, they are making archetypes. They're using archetypes. The Quran has archetypes, not actual people. So they're taking ideas from myths and then they make archetypes in many cases.
I don't think
Abu
it's
Lahab.
that sophisticated.
Sorry?
I think your explanation is too complex. The Quran is much more simple than this. It's the one who did the Quran. They were crude scribes. They did not. I don't think they had this level of imagination, the same as you, Lloyd. It was. I think it's much more simpler.
Yeah, but
I-
then go on.
I mean, yes, say basically the same that Odon has said, but I'll just phrase it a little bit differently. The Quran has one origin story. Islam has a different origin story, and we try to put both of them together and make sense of it, and that's not what happened. So the Quran is written probably in different lands, most likely up in the north. It tells a different story to a different audience. When Islam appears, they have to create what we call the narrative, the Standard Islamic Narrative. And in order to do that, they have this book, who God knows where it came from, but we have a good idea. It's certainly from the north and it has stuff from Ephraim and so on. They take that book and then they have to make it divine. So every time that the book says something, they have to make it about Mecca. If it says there are fishermen, that there are fields, there are farmers, they have to say that's our place. But those two things are completely disconnected. The book came from a different region, told a different story. Islam uses that pre-existing book in order to say this is holy, this comes from heaven, and let me explain it to you through the power of Ibn Kathir.
Well, you've got a northern narrative, right? The Jerusalem Thesis. But now they've moved south. They've moved to a blank slate called Mecca, for argument's sake. And now they've got to fit that thesis onto a new substrate, which is this Yemeni, Meccan, Arabian culture. And they've got to merge that now. You know, so then you've got a mixing of things.
Yeah. Yeah. The mixed pieces.
If I could,
couldn't fit.
Yep, go on, please.
Go on, Paul, please.
yeah, if I could perhaps share how I see this, and I take a rather different view to certainly to Mel and Odon, because my view is that the Quran does largely or almost entirely come from a fairly confined milieu in terms of time and place. I think it's the story, and it's the story of one person's life, well, primarily, although obviously it's had work done after that person died, so it's very difficult to pick apart now and try and reconstruct what the original what I would regard as this principal author says. But in my analysis, the early surahs are anti-Sasanian propaganda at the time when the Sasanians are besieging Jerusalem and threatening the temple re-establishment project, the project by Nehemiah ben Hushil to re-establish temple sacrifices, not actually to build the temple, but to restore sacrifices to the temple. And that is where we get the companions of the elephant and Abu Lahab, and these verses that are clearly aimed at a particular enemy who the Quran author had at that time, who I think can be identified as Khusro. Then the scene shifts, because for the Quran to be about Jerusalem, it can't have been announced in Jerusalem, because parts of the Quran are talking about capturing the Masjid al-Haram. It talks about expel them from where they have expelled you. So there clearly comes a time when the author, I like to call Muhammad, left Jerusalem and is then perhaps at the end of the Byzantine Sasanian War, at the time that Byzantium has been victorious. He sees an opportunity to capture Jerusalem, and sees that they're overstretched, they're exhausted, and during the war, the Arabs have established some sort of proto-state in Tashkistan, and so you don't have to believe that every verse in the Quran is addressed to a Jerusalem audience. Many, probably the vast majority of them, would have been declared at a time outside Jerusalem, and would have been urging people to go back in there and to conquer Jerusalem. So that would be the way that I would see it. I don't think you have to choose one or the other. It doesn't have to be about Jerusalem or about somewhere else or about one place. It could fit into a narrative.
Yeah.
An epic they were creating, mixing fragments together. So I like what you said, an original author, an original story, and then it was changed over time.
Yeah,
Well,
I kind of agree with you.
We're getting a little bit off piece here, but yes, people tried to bury Jerusalem. They didn't, particularly after the Abbasid revolution in 750. The Abbasids really didn't like Jerusalem, and they wanted to turn everyone's attention away from Jerusalem, and they needed a fictitious place. They put it in the desert. But up until the Umayyads, they seem to be very Jerusalem focused. One looks at the Dome of the Rock and all the buildings around there. The Umayyads seem to be very comfortable with Jerusalem having all the attention, but it's when the power is seized by the Persians and they want to take the focus of attention away from the Umayyad lands and towards Persia, and that would be in broad strokes how I would see it. Yes,
I want to
come in.
Yeah, I think it's pretty obvious that the Quran has been edited over time, and if you are still seeing a single author, despite all the hands that took twisted and checked it, that might say more about the power of the human mind to see patterns and project onto it a single author. But I think even if we allow a single author at the outset, it's definitely had more than one pair of hands writing it, because we have evidence of contradiction that's there, not just because it's moved from Mecca to Medina and all that. I think that's a cover-up story for the fact that it's inherently self-contradictory, and I think it probably serves multiple purposes, and even the fact that there's traditions that the Quran was shorter at one stage and then was added to. I think that also lends the impression that there were multiple minds working on it, and if you give a novel writer some documents, they can turn that into a novel. You could have a few surahs of a Quran and give it to someone, and they will replicate that and the style of it, and have an in-house style to match the original. So I think there's not enough evidence, but I would lean towards a plurality of authors, even if there's like a core part that might be some voice of someone who's interacting with fellow preachers, like Odin's theory.
Linguistic and mathematical now shows something like 20 authors over time, because the voice is different, the writing is different across the authors.
I tend to agree with you, Paul, but I have the same remark. I don't believe that there is only one author, for the many reasons that Mel explained. And there's another one, is just when you look at the text, you see that sometimes there is a preacher preaching, and sometimes there is someone instructing him. So at least there were these two types of authorship in the Quran. But I think also, like you, that the Quran is about a big story which centers around Jerusalem. And they try to take Jerusalem, they go to Jerusalem, they are expelled from Jerusalem, and then they finally, eventually, they come back to Jerusalem. And this is what the Jerusalem Thesis is about. Not about having everything taking place in Jerusalem, but having the story centered on Jerusalem.
Yeah.
And yes, I completely agree that the Quran isn't all one person's work. But what I would say is, in my view, I see no reason why it shouldn't mostly be one person's work. And there are some surahs I'm very skeptical about, that 113 and 114 were part of the original, were part of that person. And I think I can demonstrate clearly that the beginning of Surah 9, Surah Al-Tawbah, can't have been by the same person who wrote the other, because by that stage they are in possession of the Masjid al-Haram, and exactly. We know that or we can be fairly confident that the Quran author died before the conquest of Jerusalem. Not long. It's only, by the traditional account, Muhammad died in 632. The Arab conquerors, to use a fairly neutral title, captured Jerusalem in 637 or 638. So we could only be talking about 5 years or some period like that. But I think we can be fairly confident that, for reasons Stephen Shoemaker has put forward, that Surah Al-Tawbah was written after the death of the person who ordered the conquest in the first place and led it. But the fact that there's been lots of work done, and here and there people have added insertions, and sometimes you can find parts where the interpolation so breaks the original work that you can just look at it, even in an English translation, and say those dozen words shouldn't be there. If you take those dozen words out, it reads much more poetically. It scans. It's got wordplay. It makes sense. And somebody has come along and just added a little bit in the middle. And the more you could list these, and you see patterns between them, that they all seem to say fairly similar things, the bits that are added in. So I think it was largely the work of one person, but I totally agree that it wasn't all the work of one person, and there's this, it's, as you might say, it's had work done before it got compiled.
Now also,
by the
this
time
thing,
it was compiled, nobody could tell what was genuine and what wasn't.
I think there's a problem if even if you accept that Muhammad or whoever was the author, is that all the traditions say that the Quran was written after he died. So that's a difficulty in itself. So unless you have the idea that he is narrating it to someone to remember, okay, remember this and write it down after I die, you're back into into that muddy water of the sin. But it's tricky. But no one knows for certain with all of this.
The thing about
I was about to accuse you of falling back on the traditional narrative. So, perhaps.
Yeah, Paul, let me just.
I pay no attention to any of these accounts of how the Quran came to be written. Again, you talk about contradictions. The accounts of how the Quran came together are some of the most contradictory and confused of all. I think is the one area where it's just not possible to find any sense in. If you were a Muslim, you wouldn't even know what to believe.
Yeah, I would have thought it would have been in their interest to say that Muhammad wrote the Quran, or dictated it, or that it was written down before he died. The fact that none of the narratives say it was written during his lifetime, I would suggest, especially because it's in their interest to say it was from him, that it's not from him. It's a community producing a book based on maybe their memory of whatever the movement was saying, or maybe it was another theory. Might be the notes and letters from the preachers that got turned into a Quran later.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Paul and Mel and everyone. What I wanted to add is that it's not. I don't think the whole of Surah 9 has been written after the taking of Jerusalem. And beside, there are other parts within the Quran, within the other surahs, that seems to have been written in the same context. In Surah 8 and Surah 2, there are parts which look like they have been written with the context of Jerusalem having already been taken. So this would lead us to think that when the Quran was ultimately compiled, there was an edition process where bits were mixed. You see that bits from different authors and different periods of time, they were mixed and they were sort of clipped and remixed. And this is why the text is so difficult to understand. And this is why we need to get as many pieces of the puzzle as we can, and to look at them with an eagle eye, to have in order to have everything in mind. Right.
Yeah. There's a lot to think about. We could all. I don't think we're all wrong. I think we're all doing an analysis and seeing that there are different ways. JC he's a fiction author. He's looking at this with an author's eye. How would you reconstruct a narrative on the basis of what we have, right? How would you combine things? How would you take different ideas and make composites? And the story's incoherent, as Catherine says, but we all have plausible ideas, right? And I think we should be throwing them out there and evaluating them, because the truth is somewhere in there, right? And at some point, statistically, something has to be more probable. And I don't think we're going to know for sure on some things, but we can say what it's not. And I think we're all generally converging. None of us is saying, yeah, it's a place on the moon. We're all saying it's a place in the Gulf somewhere. Whether it's Shatt al-Arab or whether it's Bahrain, it's not that much, but there's evidence for both. Or you can, because remember, there's red herrings, there's mistakes, there's deliberate confusion in the text. So you got Paul's, Bahrain or the UAE for that matter, both.
Oh, it's not even a place.
Or they trying to make a mythical place that's better than wherever you were before, right? Mm-hmm. So it's all of the above. So it's really hard, but we're not wrong, I think, in any of our speculations, right? We're all coming to logical conclusions on the basis of evidence, but at some point, once you've got it all together, we can then start matching what we have and saying, look, statistically, this is most likely probable. I used to build systems, and we couldn't predict exactly where someone's going to hit, what they're going to do, but we could say, look, this is their doctrine, these are their beliefs, these are the conditions, and it's likely they'll do this, this, and this. And you can work out very well based on probabilities. It's possible. And I think we are moving in the right direction. I don't think, and I like what Paul had to say. Paul laid it out very well. It's a great case. Odon, you make a fantastic case. So does Mel. So all of us.
It's not over, Lloyd. It's not over. In our next stream, we will look at the details of the Jerusalem Thesis.
Right.
Masjid al-Haram, God's temple, the standing place of Abraham, and so on. And and there we will see that it's all about Jerusalem for these verses.
For sure. Look, I think Jerusalem might have been the focal point, and then it shifted because they had to go to Mecca. It's like, right, guys, let's pack our bags and move, right? So
Yeah,
then,
If we're
yeah.
if we're going to Jerusalem next week, I've got a thought, a final thought on Mecca, which I'd quite like to share. And it relates to Thomas the Tank Engine. I don't know if you're familiar with the Thomas the Tank Engine stories.
yeah.
We're not heathens, and
but
you know, we know who Thomas the Tank Engine is.
Although you might be from me, and
He knows
Look,
it's referred
savages, what do you think, Paul?
I could find Thomas the Tank Engine in the Quran. So here's my take. Thomas the Tank Engine is a series of children's books set in a fictitious island called Sodor, Sodor. Now, where it was written by the Reverend W. Awdry, and where did he get the name for that island from? Is if you do a little bit inquisitive and you wonder where Sodor is. Sodor is the name of a Viking kingdom back in the day. They had the Northern Islands, which were the Orkneys and the where's further out in the Orkneys, and then you've got the Southern Islands, which were the Hebrides. And so Sodor was a Viking kingdom, short-lived, that was out in the around the Hebridean Islands. Now, the church at one stage, before it was the Church of England, before the Reformation, it was convenient to have a diocese that covered all the islands that were on the west coast of Great Britain. And so they called this diocese Sodor and Man. So it covered the Viking kingdom of Sodor, which is the Hebrides, and also the Isle of Man. When the Church of Scotland went its independent way, the Church of England kept the name of the diocese. So if you found, apparently, if you look at a list of Church of England dioceses, you would find a diocese called Sodor and Man. But if you looked on a map and see where does this diocese cover, you would only see one island, which was the Isle of Man, because this diocese covered areas that are then part of the Church of Scotland. So you've got this name, as Sodor and Man, because Sodor is a name without a place. It's when Reverend W. Awdry, who was, of course, was himself as a Church of England clergyman, he wanted a name for a place, and he said he was always intrigued by this diocese which had two places but only one island, and he imagined that there must be another island somewhere just beyond the Isle of Man that somehow wasn't on anybody's chart. And so he put his fictitious and rather implausible island with the highest ratio of steam engines to people, I think, of any place as it was ever imagined, on this fictitious island. And I think that something rather similar happened with Mecca, that you want somewhere to put the Muhammad story. You look through the Quran, which actually is very short on place names. You find Mecca as a name. You look on the maps. You can't find Mecca on any of the maps. So you put it out in the desert in the same way that the Reverend W. Awdry put Sodor out in the middle of the North Sea, knowing that no one's ever going to look and look too closely and check for it. And that's essentially why you find Thomas the Tank Engine in the Quran.
Right.
If you have a name without a place, people will find somewhere for it to be.
Yeah.
People
They
will
leave
make
it vague,
stories
so that your
about it.
mind fills in
Like
the
El
blank.
Dorado or Xanadu.
Yeah. No, I mean, you fill in the blank because look, they leave it vague deliberately, because if they don't give you the details, you can't prove them wrong. So there's a whole bunch of, right? So yeah, we should call it a night here. I mean, this has been very thought-provoking. Everyone's sitting here like, yeah, we're all deep in thought here, I think.
Yep.
No?
Yep. You know what? I can close with the famous statement of my president. That is President Muhammad Anwar el-Sadat. Everybody know him to be Sadat. When they were trying to make the peace between Egypt and Israel, and they asked him the question, it was a direct question: will you make peace with Israel, if we give you the entire land of Sinai back? And he thought about it for a second and he said, maybe yes, maybe no, but exactly, I don't know. And that's exactly how I feel about all the different opinions has been given today on that subject, because I don't know. I wish I can know. If somebody can help me to put my finger on it and feel it and prove it and explain it to others, I'll be appreciative. But that's the beauty of the Quran.
Well, at
About
least Usama didn't say we're a great team except for Lloyd. You know.
Oh,
I think the Quran is simply the Mahmed files that got redacted to get rid of the names of places. You know, it's a great way of
It's
hiding
the
the
Epstein
evidence.
files of 732. How's that?
But can you imagine, guys? I'm going to get serious for a minute here. When I open the Bible and I see a book, it's called the Book of Acts, and then I see a bunch of letters written by this guy. His name is Paul. And in seminary, I studied, and I can tie his letters with his traveling ministry with the Book of Acts. I mean, seriously, the Book of Acts is written by Luke. The writings of the letters written by different people, as we know, that this was written by this. Paul is the author, but some other people pinned it down for him for whatever reason it is. We can get to it later. But I can tie the Bible, the trips, and with the travel of the Apostle Paul on his mission trips. They're big, they're huge. I can go right now. Right now, I can fly and get to these cities where the Apostle Paul were traveling. And if I put the Bible as a GPS, as a blue line, I follow it to go the trips. So why can't we do that about just the simple fact is Mecca? For heaven's sake, I'm not asking to give me the history of Islam, just one city. I can't. Good luck.
Yeah, no, it cannot be used for archaeology. It's useless. It's myth. It's myth.
It was not, somebody was saying, well, Paul was in the beginning of Christianity, the first center of Christianity. I can go to Abraham's trips. No kidding. I can go to Genesis, written literally 1,500 years before Christ, took place 1,800, 1,900 years before Christ. And I can tell you the trips of Abraham when he left Iraq, went to the land of Canaan, went down to Egypt, came back to Canaan, went to the Abimelech land, came back to Canaan. I mean, we can do the same thing with every trip in the Bible. Hundreds of years before Muhammad. You may think if Muhammad came 600 years after Christ, we have better map, better direction, better details, better information about everything. When in reality, we know nothing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and that's
I think
actually
the
very
lack of
telling.
the lack of detail has to be on purpose. It's not. They could have easily made it so much easier to understand everything.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't completely agree
they-
with you, Usama. I'm sorry. We don't know nothing. We know little, and the little we know contradicts Islam completely.
That's true. That's true. But I'm sorry. If I'm a Muslim guy try to defend my theory of Mecca, I have nothing to share. I literally am empty. I'm empty hands.
One of the problems is that, like Odon said before, we're just obsessed with the narrative. We keep reading the narrative. So when we look at the Quran, because that's what we are reading, we cannot see past that wall and realize that maybe there are some diacritics that are applied in the wrong places. And actually there was a city there, but now the word has been hidden. So we cannot see this. We cannot see verses that have been purposely removed because we cannot find them.
Exactly.
So the enemy is the narrative. Once we realize, hey,
No.
the narrative is not what we've been told. There are two different origins here. Then we can look at the Quran with a fresh pair of eyes and hopefully get there. And actually, maybe once we are finished with the presentations about the Jerusalem Thesis, we should have a conversation like this where we just go through the narrative, and maybe with all of that we have learned through the series, we can try to put together when the narrative changed, by whom. Maybe we can find a few more details.
I hope so. I sure hope so.
Okay, yeah, let's call it a night here then. I think it's been great. I think we're all now, our heads are buzzing. So this has been interesting. Yeah, but this 15th century trip or 16th century trip by this Italian, I mean, that's interesting. That's an oddity for sure. You know?
Yeah, by the way, in that account, he said, according to him, God had cursed the land because absolutely nothing grew in that region.
There we go.
Yeah. So yeah. So guys, we'll pick this up again next week. Usama, I've only got a couple more episodes to do on the Quran, and then I go into the witness protection program.
Listen, that is only part 1. Don't confuse our audience, please.
Well, you know, I'm going to create an AI me, and then you can.
No. The Bible said, not the Bible. Muhammad said, let's begin to Muhammad. Don't start something unless you finish it. It will be better if you don't start it. Okay? I'm quoting you, Prophet Muhammad. Peace be upon him.
You know what? I'm going to go to Mecca. I'm going to dig this guy up, and I'm going to shoot him in the head. So, guys, thanks. It's been fantastic. It's been really, really good.
God bless you all.
Yeah. Right. So, guys, thank you. We'll pick this up next week, but this has been fantastic. Really excellent research. Thanks all for coming. And thank you to the audience. Please, guys, like, share, subscribe. Everyone should be described in the description, so please support their channels as well. Thanks, everyone. Take care and good night. God bless.
Good night.
Right.
Take care.